Hi, and welcome to That's Ruddy Mysterious, a podcast of short tales about true mysteries. What happened to the Flannan Isles Lightkeepers? Who was responsible for the Gardner Museum heist? I'm not going to solve those mysteries, but they'll be interesting to learn about. I'm your host, Kelly with an I. Transcripts for all episodes can be found at that'sruddymysterious.wordpress.com. No apostrophe and no exclamation point. Today's tale is about the Carroll A Deering. The Carroll A Deering was a 5-masted schooner built in Bath, Maine in 1919 by the G.G. Deering Company. It was one of the last wooden cargo ships ever built and was the last ever built by the G.G. Deering Company. The ship was named after the owner's son. It was 255 feet long, 44 feet wide, and weighed 1,879 tons. It was intended for commercial use, designed to carry 3,500 tons of coal when fully loaded. The Carroll A Deering was first launched on April 4, 1919, and was discovered abandoned near North Carolina less than 2 years later. The Carroll A Deering's final voyage began normally enough when it set sail from Norfolk, Virginia on August 22, 1920. It was bound for Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, with a cargo hold full to the brim with coal, and by all accounts was in great shape. Aboard the ship were an experienced captain, Captain William H. Merritt, his son and first mate, Sewell Merritt, and a crew of 10 men. Just a few days into this voyage, Captain Merritt fell ill and the ship had to return to land. They landed at Lewes, Delaware, where Captain Merritt and his son disembarked. Captain Merritt was replaced by a retired 66-year sea captain veteran, Captain Willis B. Wormel. He was a well-respected ship's master. Charles B. McClellan replaced Sewell Merritt as first mate. On September 5, 1920, the Carroll A Deering again set sail for Brazil. They delivered the coal without incident, and the crew of the Carroll A Deering were given leave. During this leave, Captain Wormel visited with another captain and old friend, George Goodwin. Wormel told Goodwin that the crew of the Deering was unruly and that he didn't trust any of them, save for the ship's engineer, Herbert Bates. The Carroll A Deering left Brazil on December 2, 1920. They stopped in Bridgetown, Barbados for supplies. At this time, Captain Wormel tells Captain Hugh Norton of the Augustus W. Snow that he's having trouble with the crew, especially his first mate McClellan, who he said was habitually drunk while ashore and mistreated the crew. He did say he wasn't worried about a mutiny, however. While in Bridgetown, first mate McClellan got drunk and also complained to Captain Norton. McClellan told Norton that he couldn't discipline the crew without Wormel interfering. McClellan also complained that he had to do all the navigating because of Wormel's poor eyesight. Later, Captain Norton overheard McClellan say while drunk, "I'll get the captain before we get to Norfolk, I will." McClellan was arrested for the mutinous talk, but it must not have bothered Captain Wormel too much because he bailed McClellan out of jail on January 9, 1921, and they immediately set sail for Hampton Roads, Virginia. On January 29, 1921, the Carroll A Deering passed the Cape Lookout lightship, which is off the coast of North Carolina. The Deering hailed the lightship with a megaphone and reported that they lost both their anchors and chains in a storm off Cape Fear. The Deering asked the lightship to notify the owners of the Deering about those lost things. The lightship's radio was out at the time, so they were unable to relay the message. They did, however, record the conversation in their logbook. The captain of the lightship, Captain Thompson Jacobson, was able to describe the man that hailed him. He said the man was tall, thin, and had reddish hair, which none of the crew of the Carroll A Deering had. Jacobson said the hailer used broken speech unlike an officer. As a result, he said he took the hailer as Scandinavian. Jacobson also said the crew was milling around the ship's foredeck, which is an area where the crew is not usually allowed. On January 30, 1921, at about 5:45 p.m., Captain Henry Johnson on the SS Lake Elon said he saw the Carroll A Deering sailing directly into the Diamond Shoals. The next day, January 31st, 1921, surfman C.P. Brady, a lookout at the Cape Hatteras Coast Guard station, saw the Carroll A. Deering had run aground on the outer edge of the Diamond Shoals. All of the sails were set. At the time, however, due to the weather, no one could get close enough to identify the ship. The weather remained bad enough over the next few days that although rescue attempts were made, no one could get close enough to the ship. That changed on February 4th, 1921. The weather finally cleared enough for a tugboat rescue to be mounted. The rescue crew was captained by James Carlson. He said that when they got on the deck of the Carroll A. Deering, they saw the ship had been completely abandoned and was badly damaged and taking on water. Much of the equipment aboard the Carroll A. Deering had been damaged. The steering equipment had been disabled. The wheel was shattered, the rudder was disengaged from the stock, and a binnacle box was crushed and broken in. A sledgehammer was leaning ominously nearby. Captain Carlson said the ship's log was also missing, as was the ship's navigation equipment. The lifeboats and life rafts were missing. The crew's personal effects were missing, and a ladder was hanging over the edge of the ship. In the galley, it looked like food was being prepared at the time the ship was abandoned. There were ribs in a pan, pea soup in a pot, and coffee on the stove in the captain's quarters. Much of this evidence seemed to suggest the crew of the Carroll A. Deering left in a hurry. However, some of it, including the fact that someone had taken the time to light the red warning lights on the mast indicating a derelict or out-of-control ship, suggested that they may have taken their time. Captain Carlson found some other strange evidence. Both of the anchors that the Deering had reported missing to the lightship were still on board. The sails had been set, which suggests the ship had been abandoned prior to running aground, as normally the sails would be lowered upon a ship wrecking. Carlson discovered the map indicating the Carroll A. Deering's daily positions. It was strange because until January 23, 1921, the map had been updated in Captain Wormel's distinct handwriting. After that date, however, the handwriting had changed. The only sign of struggle appeared to be in the captain's quarters. Dinner was on the stove, but the cabin was in chaos. It was determined the Carroll A. Deering was unsalvageable and a hazard to navigation, so on March 4, 1921, it was towed out and blown up with dynamite. Some wreckage from this floated ashore in Ocracoke Island, North Carolina, where local people used the timbers to build their homes and where the timbers remain on display in the local museum. On April 11, 1921, Christopher Columbus Gray, a local fisherman, found a message in a bottle. The message said, "Deering captured by oil-burning boat. Something like chase, taking off everything, handcuffing crew. Crew hiding all over ship, no chance to make escape. Finder, please notify headquarters. Deering." This was quite a clue. Experts examined the note, and some determined that it was written in ship engineer Herbert Bates' handwriting. Other experts, however, decided it was written in Christopher Columbus Gray's handwriting. Gray admitted to having written the note. The U.S. government undertook a massive investigation to determine what happened to the Carroll A. Deering. Many possibilities were considered. Some people thought the Carroll A. Deering were the victims of Bolshevik pirates because a German fishing boat, the Senator Schroeder, had been taken by them. There was no evidence for this theory, however. Rum runners were also considered, as this was during Prohibition, but it was decided that the Carroll A. Deering was too large, conspicuous, and slow to be of any interest to rum runners. Had a mutiny taken place? There was certainly some evidence for this, and the captain was definitely not getting along with his crew, especially First Mate McClellan. But there was never any definitive proof. It was also thought that maybe weather had something to do with it, and there were hurricanes in the area at the time, but this was discounted because the Carroll A. Deering was moving away from the storms, and the ship seemed to have been abandoned in an orderly fashion, not in a panic. As extensive as the investigation was, the U.S. government closed the investigation, having never made any official finding. What happened to the crew of the Carroll A. Deering? There were a range of theories. Some theorized that the crew were the victims of the Bermuda Triangle or some other paranormal event. Others think that maybe the Carroll A. Deering ran into some trouble and that the crew was saved by the SS Hewitt. The SS Hewitt disappeared around this time, so it's believed that the crew of the Carroll A. Deering disappeared with it. Whatever befell the crew of the Carroll A. Deering, no sign of the lifeboats was ever found. What happened to the crew of the Carroll A. Deering? What do you think? If you're listening on Spotify, scroll down and let me know what you think. Thanks for listening to today's episode of That's Ready Mysterious. I'm your host, Kelly with an I. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a review and follow That's Ready Mysterious to be updated about new episodes. Tune in next Tuesday for another thought-provoking tale.